Well, good morning, everybody. Here's my plan for today. After we kind of walk through some of the stats of July, looking at recent precip, temperature trends, and also assessing the latest drought monitor, I want to get into a quick talk about the potential tropical cyclone that could be developing near Florida later this weekend. It could get the name Debbie. We'll then move into kind of our model comparison. I want to look at the 7 and 10 day again like we did yesterday. I thought that was kind of neat to see the shifts because there has been an interesting model trend on the drier side that I think we should talk about. I want to talk then about the longer term pattern getting into the rest of August and beginning of September and finish up with some longer range outlook, which was just released from the Canadians. It's a model we don't often look at. There's a reason why I don't look at it. I'll kind of make that point for you a little bit later. And then my last two maps will be about some international weather. So you've been looking here at the last 72 hours of total accumulated precipitation. And yesterday, again, we saw some pretty nasty storms that rolled through parts of the Midwest into the Mid-South over into Kentucky, Tennessee. A lot of wind damage with some of these. And that, of course, follows the previous day's severe wind damage that happened here in Kansas, parts of Nebraska, and then up into the kind of northwest Corn Belt. It's been a very active week for severe weather. If we add on to this, like I've been doing lately, just the previous days, this gives us a week, look back at the last week, we can identify a few very heavy corridors of rainfall pretty clearly here. Now, the rains that came into Kansas, massive blessing in this area. This was one spot we had forecast much drier, and the storms continued to build into that. There's unstable air there and did a lot more, outperformed what we had predicted. But this is still an area of major concern down here in the Southern Plains, given the heat that was just experienced and the risk going forward of staying too close to the kind of very elongated subtropical high, which starts in the Atlantic and actually comes all the way here into the southwestern United States. We'll look more at that in a few moments here. But the next map I want to show you is a percent of normal map, and this goes back 30 days. So we're kind of getting a full look at the month of July. And while we did work hard, the atmosphere did to eliminate drought in this area, at least the drought that had been developing, still dry despite even some recent rains that have come into parts of West Virginia, Ohio, Pennsylvania, and pockets of the Northeast as well. We did see a shrinking of the drought area that was here, and the pockets of drought that had been in the central and southern plains have kind of closed up a little bit as well. But there are still significant areas, take a look down here in Texas, that have missed out on some recent storm behavior. Same thing with parts of Montana, getting throughout the Rocky Mountains. Of course, right in through here we don't have observations, just to be clear. And the western United States just continues to stay quite hot throughout the month of July, and the precipitation was quite sparing across some areas that are able to usually get July thunderstorm activity around the larger, flow with the southwest monsoon. So note how dry it's been in the Columbia Basin, getting in toward parts of the Willamette Valley, then throughout California's Central Valley. Now, for the most part, growers in this part of the world, this is fine, given that a lot of the crop is irrigated. It's not everybody, but the heat and this dryness, for those that live over here that are asking, this is not disastrous for this area, just to be clear. But when we look at the precip stats, it's been quite dry in the west. And you can see here most of the climate reporting districts are in the drier half of the distribution, with several of them getting up here kind of in the top 10 to 15 years. Meanwhile, throughout the midsection of the country, my home state of Illinois has been exceptionally wet. We do have one climate district kind of in the southeast here that's the wettest July on record. And you can see that this was added to by, remember, the beginning of the month that we had Beryl that came through like this, and then just repeated storms out of the northwest, including, I believe I counted up 3 different derecho events that came in the month of July to the Midwest, parts of the upper Midwest and northern plains. Again, that area of drought really starts to show up a little bit better here in parts of Ohio, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania, even parts of Virginia as well. But we can't deny that flow that came around the Bermuda High took care of a lot of major dry acres in this area, kind of bringing them back from what had been a pretty rough go of it. I want to show you the latest on the soil moisture. Many of you go to this website. I've kind of showed how to use it in the past. It's down. It's not functioning right now. The maps are still there. But the website isn't working, and I'll send a message to them later today to make sure that we can get that fixed. But I'm going to go down to 100 centimeters or 40 inches and just look at our soil moisture issues, because starting in Alberta, clipping parts of Montana, the western Dakotas, and then coming to like western and central Nebraska, which, remember, this part of Nebraska got hit very hard early in the month with a large hail event. But then down into Kansas, you can see this part of the plains just showing up with very low 100 centimeter soil moisture, part of the Ohio River Valley, very similar to this, although quite wet, just in this narrow corridor that kind of sneaks in between. And so major precipitation disparity in a few of those areas. Texas, extremely wet in its southeast, but the drier it kind of gets here the farther to the north and west you go in Texas. And again, this area by the Palouse, the I-5 corridor through the Willamette Valley, just seeing some very low soil moisture values. Our drought monitor overall didn't change too much in the last month. Here's the 1-month change map. So we saw degradation and drought in parts of Kansas, pockets throughout the western and northern plains. Here in the upper Midwest, this is kind of the North Woods area, but improvement just in the last week everywhere that you see this shade of color, which has been a lot of the southeast getting back over to the mid-south. But the newest drought monitor, we have about it's about 48% of the lower 48 in some form of drought. So that includes this shading here, which is the abnormally dry category. But about 20% of the lower 48 is actually in D1 to D4 drought. I did want to just step this back a little bit. This was the last week. If we go back over the last month, this is what the drought monitor class change map has looked like. So quite a bit of improvement here. Pockets of the central U.S. I think the Corn Belt right now is about 5% in drought. And you can see a lot of degradation throughout the west in that pocket again in Ohio, West Virginia, Pennsylvania, even including parts of Kentucky there, which lately has gotten rain, but over the last 4 weeks had degradation. And I guess we just go back 9 weeks, I think that takes us to the beginning of summer. This is what our drought monitor class change map looks like overall. So I just find this to be a pretty informative way to look at things. Now, despite some of the heat that we've seen this past week that has sat down here in the southern plains, it was not able to outdo the longer stretches of near normal to cooler than normal weather we saw earlier in the month of July. So much of for example, the Mississippi Valley, parts of the Missouri Valley, big section here like the Red River Valley, this whole central plains area getting into the Midwest really avoided significant stretches of long duration heat. Now, again, I'm saying that knowing that we've been very hot here. Montana's been a major wild card, and you're going to see up to maybe a 35 to 40 degree swing in high temperatures over the next 7 days alone as we've gone back over very hot. But both coasts, east and west, have been very warm compared to their normal summer averages. And temperatures here putting several climate reporting districts in the top in terms of the ranks. So just a great map to kind of take in to assess that. Now I'm going to try not to spend too much time on this. I'll make sure you have the link so that you can do this on your own. Let's just review this really quickly. I'll go back to the main site. This is the one that I like to use to look at the NDVI data. So when you get here, it'll look like this. Click on Admin Level 1 because we're going to do this for the United States. Come down to Global, click on the plus sign, and click right here on the Esri Sentinel-2 crops. And we're going to click on that so that now the map is masked for cropland only. And just thinking this through, let's start in the southeast like Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina. And NDVI values there are above average, which is important to see. I think that's really bumped up lately, helped along by some of the recent rains. If we kind of pick some of the states in the Delta here, I'll just go Louisiana, Mississippi, Arkansas, Tennessee. NDVI values are above the historical averages there. And actually, let's leave those and go ahead and just grab more states that grow corn and soybeans. They're going to grab a lot of these. So Illinois, Indiana, Ohio. Sorry, this takes me just a moment. There's Nebraska, Iowa, the Dakotas, Minnesota, Wisconsin, Michigan. That's a big area. That's not to leave out Colorado, Oklahoma, and Texas, but I wanted to grab these states just to show you that we are a hair below where we were a year ago in terms of NDVI, but still above the 20-year average. I got to click off these, sorry. But when we take a look farther to the west and to the south, we do start to get just a little bit of a different scenario, especially when you compare it to the last couple of years. Remember, in Texas a year ago, we were in the middle of a stretch of days where it was like 50, 60 days of 100 degrees. And in Texas, this is what happened when that occurred last year. Look at these NDVI values just tank. Well, this year we're kind of averaging. We're kind of sitting right here on the average. If we go up a little bit farther north, let's go ahead and get Oklahoma and Colorado together. NDVI values lately have popped up here a little bit, so just important to see that. The Canadian Prairie, let's just go ahead and grab 3 different provinces. very high NDVI coming off the wet conditions that we saw in June and early July. The temperatures finally cranked up and the rain slowed down a bit, but it's been dropping a bit lately, and things have been very dry in parts of Alberta and southern Saskatchewan as an example. But I'll finish over here in the west, and we'll pick up in Washington, which is a hair below average. We'll add Oregon into it, which makes it stay about the same, and then California, again, a little bit higher than a year ago, but overall, we're sitting right about average. So I know I didn't do the Northeast, but I just wanted you to walk through this yourself later if you'd like to. I find it to be a fantastic resource, and you can go anywhere around the world you want to and look at things. We spent a lot of time looking at Ukraine and Russia as an example. But coming back to the western United States, I want to give you an update on fires. Now we're up to 4.489 million acres burned. A year ago, 1.1 million. This, when compared to the last 10 years, would rank fifth in terms of most acreage burned, with the average being 3.6 million. So we're certainly above that average and certainly above where we were a year ago. And just watching yesterday as the low curled up out of Iowa, Minnesota, Wisconsin. In fact, last night when I drove home from Chicago, we saw some great storms. I love it when it storms and I'm driving because it keeps me awake. I get to watch them. But you can see the smoke swirling around this, and then the new wildfires here in the Northwest, which really need to continue to get a lot of our attention, as this smoke has been quite prolific throughout this summer time period. But as the sun was setting, deeper storms moving into the parts of the Ohio River Valley, which we talked about at the beginning, and then also back here in and around the Panhandle, some very large storms just to consider as well. Same thing for parts of Florida and dotting throughout the southeast. But as the sun set, we can really just get a good glimpse at the wildfire smoke that was in Washington, Oregon, California, parts of Idaho. And these fires have put out just a lot, really degrading the air quality in that area. But a lot of attention right now in the meteorological community is over this cluster of storms here. And this is what it looks like this morning. So I just want to make a very solid point here. We have to be very careful consumers of weather forecast information, because there's been a lot of, I'm on some social media. I try to stay away from it as much as possible, but there's been just a lot of terrible things put out about this, just bad meteorological advice, a lot of hype. This has not even yet formed. It's just a group of tropical thunderstorms that over the last 2 days started in the Lesser Antilles. They're now over the Greater Antilles, which of course includes Cuba. And what we just know about this is that the environment ahead of it is pretty rich. So picking this up here, I was waiting for the 7:37 a.m. update from that's East Coast time to record, because I wanted to see if they changed this, and they did. They went up to a 90% chance of development. And you know that all week long we've seen forecast models take this here. We've watched it stall out here and kind of spin around like this and leave. We've even seen some forecast models taking it to Texas, and yesterday morning one of them even brought it right up into Illinois and Indiana. And that is just the kind of stuff we have to be careful of consuming, because one single deterministic model run is not a wise way to be looking at weather forecasts for hurricanes. So I want to make a point. This isn't even a named system yet, technically not even a tropical depression. And it could get that classification later today, but right now we're still waiting on it to develop. The environment into which it's going, though, is quite conducive to development. And my biggest concern is, if you take a look right here in this part of the Gulf of Mexico, the ocean temperatures are a few degrees above normal. And if you look at how warm they are, we can kind of match this up. We're well above 30 degrees C, which means these ocean temperatures are in that that mid-80s range in this particular area, right off, for example, off the coast of west coast of Florida. So it's going to boil down to a case of wind shear, and it's going to boil down to how much time does it get to spend over open ocean before it develops. And that is what we don't know. The model spread is very large, including where the potential track of this is going to go. I love these maps made by Tomer Berg. He's a PhD student out at Oklahoma University. And what he's blended together is the European, the GFS, the UK Met, which is in the Meteorological Office in the United Kingdom, and the CMC. And what you've got here is those different models kind of projecting where the tropical system is going to go. And now that this is only going out a 78-hour forecast, so this is just 3 days ahead of us, into early next week, there is better confidence that this is going to end up somewhere in this area. That's all there is, though. Better confidence. There's no guarantee. And we need to watch it very carefully, because this kind of coastal area of Florida is quite vulnerable, especially around Tampa, to any tropical system, especially any that goes to the north of Tampa. I have no solid information yet on storm surge or heavy rain, and it'll be something we're going to watch all weekend. But the latest model guidance takes into the southeast and possibly along the Carolina coast. So what we're trying to assess here is how much rainfall we could possibly get out of that, and that's why I want to do that multi-model analysis for you in just a few moments. So we're going to come back to the resulting rainfall from this in a second, but I want to be very clear, knowing the intensity is going to be challenging. It does have the potential, just given the warm ocean temperature, that if the wind shear is down and it just stalls out over this area in terms of its forward speed, it could very quickly intensify to become a stronger system. That is what we know as of early Friday morning. Okay, bigger picture things. What is this going to have to contend with? So let's look at the upper level flow of the atmosphere. Here's the trough that just moved through the Midwest. This is the one that brought all that spin you just saw in the satellite data here. It's now going over parts of the Appalachian Mountains. Now at this particular point, it'll be an interaction of a few troughs. This one here, this is the trough that's associated with the low in the upper atmosphere. And the flow, if it's coming around the base of this, that could help to pull this in this direction. But there's another piece to this that shows up right here as we get into Monday, for example. And we have a third kind of trough feature that's sitting right in this area here. And the flow around it will be doing something like this in the mid-levels, which I think is going to be another part of the steering current bringing this around. So we have flow like this. We have the tropical system sneaking in between. And if I just put some arrows on it, it makes a lot more sense to think that this is going to track over Florida, Georgia, and possibly come back out into this part of the Atlantic Ocean skirting the Carolina coast. Now with this deeper low, which we've been talking about now for a while, developing between the Great Lakes and the Hudson Bay, what we're going to be paying attention to there is through next week, how does the frontal boundary then stretch as we watch this tropical system skirt the coast? This is all the way out to next Wednesday afternoon. And where that frontal boundary has kind of moved lately has been dependent on the size of this ridge. And it's been pushing it a bit farther to the north, and I want to see the result of that in a few moments. There's still cooler weather coming in, but where the precipitation is forecast has changed. So we're now out there to Friday, and now this is the artificial intelligence. This is just one forecast model, and it's like a single run, not an ensemble. And so many of you are probably looking at this coming into the North Carolina-Virginia border, and that is very much not known if it's going to do that. But overall, as we play through about the 12th, 13th, 14th, it'll be the progression of a trough coming across the northern tier of the U.S., where the ridging stays to the south. That ultimately determines the temperature and precipitation pattern. And I'm going to show you that in a few moments. All right, so thinking all of this through, this is the next 14 days. And this is from the European model. This is its version of this. We're looking at precipitation anomalies. I just want to make the point that even though the European model, it's looking somewhere 1 to 2 inches wetter than average here, there is the potential in this corridor that we could be seeing much, much higher rainfall amounts if the tropical system deepens and then hugs the coast more closely. The other thing that is important to point out is that this area in through here, which is showing up drier in the model, has expanded in the most recent runs. We've seen a narrowing of the heavier rainfall bands that we were expecting around the southern side of the broader trough that's going to develop over the Hudson Bay. So, all week long, we kind of looked at a bigger area in through here of wetter conditions. That, of course, is trended a little drier. The southwest monsoonal moisture into the Four Corner states has improved as well, but this is the region that we've seen show up with a bit of a drier forecast. So we've got to watch that carefully. But overall, with the ridging returning back into the northwest and into the British Columbia at times, we're continuing to see the wildfire threat there. Our all hazards weather map today shows the excessive heat watches and warnings, air quality issues in the northwest, also down in the southwest. But we've kind of suppressed the heat a bit farther to the south here. It had spent so many days over a broader area. We can see that these heat advisories, watches, and warnings are now much farther to the south and roll up the east coast. A couple of places where we are keeping an eye on flood. This is from last night's rain into early this morning. But I want to quickly take you back up to British Columbia and Alberta. There we go. Because we once again saw very large fires come out here, right here coming off the mountains, spreading into the Canadian prairie. Now, earlier in the month, last month, the large fires were way up to the north. A lot of those put out by heavy rain. But new fires have erupted in this area, and that's contributing to the smoke kind of propagating across the country over the next few days. So 48-hour forecast of the smoke. Look at the low. I love to see that, the smoke curling up around the low here. But in the west, very widespread wildfire smoke in the upper atmosphere continues to spread. All right, that is just kind of a counting of where we've been and a quick short forecast. On the thunderstorm side of it, let's get an update on this map. No changes, good. General area of thunderstorms with a marginal risk here across a big section of the east. A couple of areas we'll watch in the high plains. This is tomorrow on the 3rd. Storms to the north and here. And this is the 4th. General risk of storms across a broad area of the country. It's this interesting opening up right here that I want to show you, because as I kind of let this reset, the subtropical high is very expansive. Can you see this? All week long I've been a bit fascinated by this. And even though it closes up right here, there's actually an extension of it, right? All the way over there. And this subtropical high is what we oftentimes fear throughout the growing season as getting planted over one area. And this year, it's been planted, across the Great Basin into the northwest. But we've seen enough of these troughs digging through that we've seen rain coming out of the northwest, sparking off those storms. But it's interesting, the flow around the base of this is going to be pushing wet weather right into this area over the next couple of days. And the high-res NAM is picking up on this, okay? So here's early this morning, decent initialization, but not great. It's been struggling all week. You're going to watch one low curl up through the Ohio Valley. So this is our general risk of storms here. The risk of stronger storms right in through this area later today. But watch here. The moisture, if I just go back and then play it again forward, is coming up out of the southeast. It's kind of a rare direction to watch moisture flow in parts of the southwest. So it's coming out of the southeast and rolls right through, Oregon into Washington by the time we get into Saturday morning, Saturday afternoon, and evening. Look at that. So the trajectory of this rain kind of went like this in through this area while we watched one storm system leave east. Now, I imagine a lot of you on Sunday morning are watching down here. This is where the high-res NAM, which is not a model we rely on for tropical cyclone development or placement. It's got boundary condition issues in the model, and so we just have to be careful. But we'll look at it. Why not? It's bringing the circulation right over southern Florida, running across the state north to south, and that's where it's currently got it. We're just going to take it at face value. We're going to use the models to kind of compare things to. So here's my 7-day to 10-day outlook using the models. So artificial intelligence 7-day, 10-day. I'm a bit surprised that it's maintained the wetter bias to the south here. That will be important to watch because some of the recent forecast runs have taken some of this out, but the AI has left it in. You can also see, let's shrink that up one. There you go. You see the color bar now. The artificial intelligence is going after like 7 to 10 inches of rain here in a 10-day stretch. It's very wet from this tropical system because it slows it down. It hugs the coast and comes up here toward parts of the mid-Atlantic. What about the NBM, the National Blend of Models? That's the 7-day. So we've seen a narrowing of this corridor in the next 7 days and even over to the next 10. See how it didn't fill that in? That was something that the AI did. But the rainfall amounts may be a bit more realistic here, looking at something in the 2 to 4 to 5 inch range in this area rather than, some places in the AIFS going over a foot here. The potential is there for very heavy rainfall, but we just have to be cautious with some of the model output. Also take a look at Colorado, for example, western parts of Nebraska, Kansas, Wyoming getting some rain. Same thing for parts of Alberta, Saskatchewan, and Montana out of where that front's going to stall. The WPC does only a 7-day forecast, so we're just going to compare it to the other maps that are 7 days, but very similar narrowing of this corridor, wetter conditions in the, here in parts of the Northwest plains, in the Canadian prairie. Same thing for Colorado. I like this, but drier overall in the middle. And to show you the European model, I'm just going to play it for you. So just walking this forward, this is through Sunday to Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. That's 1 week out. Let's see what it adds in the following days. That's 7 days out. Let's take it out 10. So just take a look at how large of an area that the model has maintained dryness to the south and expanded it a bit farther to the north here. But these other corridors still showing up wet. The GFS, this is the 6Z. It comes out faster than the European, so we're getting a newer run. But let's take this out through the next 7 days. So that's 7 days out. And we're going to go ahead and play out 10 days. And what a difference, right? It's bringing in much wetter conditions here, leaving this as the whole, breaking up the pattern here. I mean, the 6C GFS was a much different model run than all the others. But we have to look at it. It's valuable. It's a model. But let's compare them side by side. 7-day GFS versus the European. Just want to point out that the European is the wetter model in this corridor. It's also wetter here, while the GFS is wetter out to open ocean. Just important to see these differences in the models. Next to one another, GFS left, European right. Let's play it through Friday into Saturday. We've already looked at this in the high-res NAM. By Monday, there's that stalled out frontal boundary that's going to just slowly sag. That's the one we're going to get the heavier rains on early next week. And I kind of zipped over it, but just take a look. This is on Sunday morning. GFS puts what could be named Debbie there. European, much weaker system here, and pulls it right over the top. Look at that, right over the top of Florida. Excuse me. Heavy rain going through here. I apologize for that. But let's get it out there. Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday of next week. So notice how much closer to the coast European keeps the rain while the GFS takes it out. And here come these systems around the broader trough midweek next week. And where they put their rain down is going to be quite challenging to figure out, with the wettest corridor likely staying somewhere in here, but we'll be curious to see how much of this area stays drier over that time period. To look at that, I'm going to go ahead and go to the Ensemble. This is the European Ensemble, 10-day chance of an inch. And if we drop this down to the 10-day chance of less than half an inch, got a new run in here. Let's go back to the 0Z and take you out. That is what has expanded. Now that's a half inch. I've been showing you all week the 1/10 of an inch. And just take note that if you saw this yesterday, everything north of that line didn't have color on it, but it's expanded in the models here in that region just over the last 24 hours of model simulations. Okay, if we get out there into week 2, is there any similarities in the models? Yes. How have they transitioned? Well, if I look at the Europeans specifically, the previous runs were much wetter in this area. So we've had a little bit of a drying trend, but it's gone wetter in the 4 corner states overall. I think that's the biggest trend I've seen for day 8 through 14. On the temperature side of it, this is the back side of that upper level low, so cooler here today. But take a look at this side of Montana. Now watch this carefully. Montana, 104, 105 today in places. There's Saturday into Sunday as the heat sags into the plains. We've already dropped the temperatures off 20 degrees by Sunday. Going into Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, there's the front dropping down, keeping the heat primarily down in the southern plains. By next Thursday, that's a 30-degree drop in temperatures. If you include overnight low temperatures, we're looking like a 50-degree drop here just inside of 1 week. And that's the cooler air we've been seeing in the models. There's the GFS, dropping that cooler air in over day 5 through 10, day 10 through 15, with all the heat staying in the west. That's why I wanted to keep you up to speed on those wildfires here. And then here's the European model solution. Next 5 days, that's day 5 through 10, very similar, and day 10 through 15. Now the Europeans trying to bring heat back in sooner into parts of the Midwest as an example, leaving it in the Northwest, but we'll just watch these temperature trends carefully. All right, that's just next 2 weeks. Let's start to stretch this out. July split the Pacific high. We've looked at this many times, a piece here and a piece here. So the flow has got to go over that and over that. That's that. Remember we did all that P&A analysis? That's what we're talking about. There's been troughs here and here, and a big one that extends into the North Atlantic. And that has put the Bermuda high stronger on its northern side, but made it a very big component of this forecast. Now, I apologize. This is going to switch projections on you, but I'm going to identify the same things. Look right here. We see that over the next 15 days, there remains a deeper low here. There is a trough that kind of comes into this area, but it's only there because of how large this ridge is. That's one piece. Remember, I kind of drew an arrow to it. That's one piece of the Pacific eye. Here's the other trough, and you got to go to the other side of the map to find the other. Here's the other side of the Pacific eye. So the first 15, 16 days of August, the upper level high pattern looks very similar to what July did, right? I mean, that's what the artificial intelligence is showing here. And so when I think about that, I go out there and look at those longer term forecasts, and this doesn't surprise me. The CFSV2 for mid-August went back over to a stormy corridor with active tropical cyclones, keeping drier to the south. That's exactly what we saw in July, right? And this would be the 23rd to the 29th. Drier northwest, but active corridor in through here. Looking at the European model, take note, through even the first week of September, there's this split on where there's high pressure here, and there's the stronger northern edge of the Bermuda High. That's very similar to what we saw in July. So if we come into the United States and I show you the 30-day precip, it's doing that same thing. It's got this wetter corridor, not able to pick up on the tropical systems, but they'll be there, and a little drier to the south and drier into the northwest. So there's so much about some of the early analysis we're doing for August into September that just puts July on repeat. But there is seasonal transition here, so something will change and break. It will likely come from the tropics, but I wanted you to see maybe why the CPC went with this, which we looked at yesterday and the day before. It just kept the heat in the west. It's kept flow kind of coming out of the northwest along a corridor here that looks wet and drier farther to the south. That just to add some explanation to this. We look at their monthly drought outlook. This is what they've got. Improvement here, degradation in these areas, which is where we've seen it getting worse this summer. So it's kind of a continuation of that. What I am curious about is when does La Niña start to do something in terms of affecting the jet stream flow? Because these trade winds lately have been picking up. You can see the cooler water showing up as a result. But it's having a hard time outdoing these epicenters of heat in the North Atlantic and the North Pacific, as helping to split the Pacific High, a piece there and a piece there, and keeping the Bermuda High stronger on this side. It's all a kind of a feedback within the system, with the ocean temperatures affecting the pressure and the pressure affecting the ocean temperatures. So that's what we just continue to see going forward here. But out there in the middle of the equatorial Pacific, right in what we call Niño region 3.4, so just for clarification, it's about right here, we're now averaging ocean temperatures down there at about a half degree C below normal. So that's one thing that July did, drop those ocean temperatures off enough that we have to consider what La Niña conditions might look like going forward into fall. And we'll keep a close eye on all of it. But I did want to stretch this out and show you one new model. The Canadians are always first. They put their model out right at the beginning of the new month. And are you ready? This is their forecast of ocean temperatures. September, October, November. This is where they've got the La Niña influencing things going into winter. It's still around February and March, but they back off quickly on the maintenance of La Niña into next spring. See this? In fact, they leave this heat event here. But see this cooler water? And the fact there's still something of a La Niña? I mean, I'm out in June next year. We are doing this for the fun of it, just to be very clear. If this does actually happen, and if we come into the United States, this is what you end up getting when you see something like that. Big ridge right here. Cool water off the west coast, La Niña lingering from the previous winter. You get a big ridge of high pressure in the midsection of the country, and all along its periphery, we get rain. Now, that is just pure speculation using a model that I've actually never shown you before. I refuse to show it to you most days. But let's just go back and take a look at what it's got. That's its August forecast for this year. Getting into September and October, some of this dryness down here in October is very La Niña-like. It's giving a very La Niña start to the wet season in the west and in the Ohio River Valley. And it's got that for October. This is what it's got for November and December and January. I mean, that's very La Niña looking here. But I don't know. I just wanted to give you something to look at, fun, that was longer range. Let's get back to the near term. Biggest thing for me right now is this. Whoops. And that cooler air you see there, plus the fact the MJO is lingering here, says we're going to have active monsoonal waves coming off of Central Africa, the Sahel. And while we can look at all the other places in terms of temperatures, I need to know how much this is capable of generating African easterly waves to get into that warm water. Because if it does, it's going to really begin to increase these risks of tropical systems developing. Secondly, very wet in the Indian Ocean, very wet throughout India, still wet in the North China Plain, Manchurian Plain, drier in Southeast Asia. Australia continues to see streaky precipitation behavior, although the very southeast corner is dry. To finish the games, it looks as though France will be a little bit drier, but wetter over here, Ukraine and the Russian wheat belt. Late season moisture looks like it's going to be working into this area. And we're going to talk more and more each week about South America. The dry season is still on, but we have a wetter corridor that stretches from Bolivia into Paraguay, down to Uruguay, southern Brazil, and parts of Argentina. That once we start getting into the next planting time period, which some will be able to plant in less than a month, we'll have to watch this carefully. All right, that's a lot for Friday, but that's how we do things on Friday. You all have a good rest of your day and weekend. I'll talk to you on Monday. Thanks.